Everyone used to laugh at Australia. People joked that the country built thousands of kilometers of fencing simply because it had too much empty land and nothing to do. Late-night shows in 2015 poked fun. Why fence off emptiness if there's nothing out there? But just 10 years later, those wire lines had become the frontier between survival and extinction, between steady farmer income and collapse. Even criminal investigations began to rely on the fences. This isn't a story about funny barriers. It's about how a joke turned into a nightmare. It all began on Christmas Day in 1829, when a farmer named Thomas Austin released 24 European rabbits into the wild for weekend hunting fun. But by 1880, their descendants were spreading at a rate of 60 kilometers per year, devouring pastures down to sand and crashing wool production in Victoria and South Australia. Newspapers dubbed the invasion the Grey Plague and pleaded with the government to stop the catastrophe. Western Australia responded by building the first fence in 1897. Work began near the Zedorb Cliffs. Over 10 years, it became a 1,600-kilometer barrier. 3 rows of galvanized mesh buried 30 centimeters into the ground, with 5-meter clearings on each side. No shade, no shelter. Border riders on camels patrolled 30 kilometers twice a week, patching holes in 40 degrees Celsius. The rabbits still slipped through, but farmers noticed unexpected benefits. Pigs, emus, and wild dogs couldn't get in either. Wheat began to sprout. The idea of fencing took root. By 1905, Queensland was divided into 9 rabbit districts, where farmers paid a tax to extend the mesh. Inventors were offered a $2 million reward for new technologies: electric barriers, warning lights, telegraph alarm systems. It was expensive, but hope remained. The turning point came in 1950. The myxomatosis virus escaped from test fields and reduced the rabbit population by 90%. Parliament began debating whether to dismantle the fences, but wool industry reps pushed back. Predators had learned to patrol these boundaries, remove the fence, and one bad harvest could wipe out a farmer's entire annual income. The barrier built to stop one pest had become the backbone of half the country's export revenue. The lesson was simple but brutal. Biological invaders spread faster than infrastructure can react. And once a fence becomes part of the economy, tearing it down is more dangerous than building it. Even decades later, families in the Australian outback still share campfire stories of dust clouds that rustled like rain on tin roofs. The memory of the Great Plague is still alive, but supporting the fence was tough. People boiled tea in tin cans beside wagon wheels, counting every third post to stay awake while mirages shimmered on the horizon. When camels replaced horses in 1903, it was a big deal. No more hauling water barrels, though the camels sometimes chewed leather bridles and collapsed in salt flats. Today, travelers drive dusty roads along the rabbit fence, stopping by old huts and hand-cranked gates still pointing to the Indian Ocean. Signs along the way tell how this mesh changed the ecology, economy, and even character of a nation. No one laughs at the fence anymore, because the next barrier wasn't built for rabbits. It was built for an apex predator. If the rabbit plague exhausted Australia's agriculture, then the dingoes gnawed at its conscience. Sheep farms were losing up to 10% of their flocks annually. Newspapers painted the wild dog as taxation with fangs, and politicians promised a mechanical fix. Thus, the idea of a new barrier was born, to lock all dingoes to the north and west of sheep country. It began in 1914. Queensland crews drove stakes, ignoring rivers, plains, and common sense. By 1958, the fence stretched 5,614 kilometers, longer than the distance from London to New York. It could wrap around Spain twice. This strip of barbed mesh, 1.8 meters high, became a steel line on the horizon. Workers toiled under 45 degrees sun, boiling tea in grease tins and sleeping beside red-hot wire spools. They were paid £2 per mile, but most didn't last a day. Those who stayed got clever, building sleeper barricades in rocky areas and laying down brush mats across floodplains to anchor the wire. Today, 21 doggers maintain this colossal line using diesel four-wheel drives. Each patrols a 300-kilometer segment, carrying 50 kilometers of mesh, dozens of metal fasteners, wire clamps, and a tire repair kit. They're connected via satellite to HQ in Broken Hill, where sensors track the slightest fence damage. In summer, they carry 50 liters of water and a crate of frozen oranges, the only fruit that lasts 5 days in hell. Maintenance costs $10 million a year. Part comes from state budgets, part from a 10-cent tax per shorn sheep. Farmers grumble but admit one breach and they could lose an entire flock overnight. In 2022, a dingo pack killed 59 lambs in just 4 hours. The farmer found their bodies neatly stacked beneath a tree, a silent act of accounting. But here comes the stunning twist. The fence built to stop predators began to tear apart not only ecosystems, but human lives. It cuts across the lands of 23 linguistic Aboriginal nations. Some elders help doggers find waterholes. Others call the fence a wound that splits ancient songs and kinship lines. Satellite images reveal a stark contrast. West of the fence, where dingoes roam, vegetation is lush and the soil greener. East of it, scorched shrubs, red-grey fields, and dust storms blown into Sydney sunsets. Scientists note that where predators are absent, kangaroo populations explode, visible from space. Their teeth gnaw bushes down to stumps. Their hooves churn soil into dust. More herbivores means more foxes, more cats, and no apex predator to regulate it all. Kangaroos born in dingo-free zones grow slower and with weaker bones. Evolution changed in just a few decades. Worse still, it's not just animals. Viral loads among kangaroos behind the fence are 3 times higher due to overpopulation. In spring, biologists now shoot tranquilizer darts at 10 animals per waterhole and test their blood within an hour using portable labs. In the east, where there are no dingoes, edible shrubs vanish. Thorny invasive species replace them, altering the very composition of the soil. And after that, invasive weeds arrived, forming a fire-prone carpet. The suggestion to partially dismantle the fence and reintroduce predators sparked a storm of debate. Farmers feared for their lambs and long-term loans. But increasingly, politicians were forced to ask, is the price of this wire-bound peace too high? What began as an attempt to wall off wild animals has now evolved into a much more complex reality. Fences in Australia have evolved. Some have become smarter. Others more terrifying. One of the most chilling sections lies near the so-called Thanatomics Research Centre. There, behind a double chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, rest over 70 human bodies. These corpses, donated to science, now lie under eucalyptus trees, so forensic experts can study decomposition in hot, dry climates. Their limbs shift slightly after death due to ligament contraction, an observation that has already helped solve dozens of murders. The fence guards not just the peace of the dead, but also the sanity of unsuspecting tourists. Elsewhere, the fences are now patrolled not just by doggers, but by Aboriginal rangers who combine ancient knowledge with 4K drone live streams. Elders read emu tracks and sand ripples like an open book, while tablets display live thermal maps of breaches. Their insights now feed machine learning algorithms that predict where the next wave of camels will snap steel posts like toothpicks. While technology improves, isolation begins to erode the minds of those who guard the fence. Doggers live in complete solitude for 3 weeks at a time, surviving on canned food, talking to calendars, and broadcasting music over private radio waves heard only by wombats. Companies now pay psychological hardship bonuses and arrange seaside breaks because fence fatigue can break even the toughest soul. And the fence doesn't just affect minds, it hits wallets too. Insurance companies assess properties by how many breaches occur annually. High-risk zones receive elevated premiums or are excluded from coverage altogether. Banks revise collateral value based on fence data. One rusty knot in the desert can affect an interest rate in a Sydney bank. It's no longer just wire. It's the financial nerve of the nation. But the most painful conflict lies at the cultural level. Farmers call the fence salvation. Many Aboriginal elders call it a scar on the earth. They believe the billions spent on fencing would have been better used eradicating feral cats and restoring water flows. This debate flares up every budget season. There's no such thing as neutral wire. Behind every loop are lives, laws, memories, and health. Who gets protected first, and who waits? That is the true essence of the fence. Decisions are made in a simple fibrocement hut near the town of Burke, where the Fence Council gathers quarterly. Farmers, ecologists, Aboriginal corporations, and bureaucrats sit on plastic chairs while city economists join via satellite on laggy internet. The agenda ranges from bolts to whether guard domes could replace fencing in certain valleys. At the last meeting in December, a case from Sturt National Park was presented. 2 Maremma sheepdogs reduced predation by 70% at a lower cost than 1 kilometre of new fence. Some applauded, others rolled their eyes. But one thing became clear. In a climate where repair costs could triple by mid-century, innovation isn't optional, it's necessary. The council approved a trial. 3 dog patrol teams combined with seismic sensors, with results to be reviewed next year. But all of this is just a local skirmish in a global wire war. Australia is no longer alone. No longer the only country drawing barbed lines on the map. But it has become a blueprint for the rest. In the 1980s, Botswana stretched veterinary fences across the Kalahari to stop the spread of foot and mouth disease in export cattle. The result? Catastrophic. Wildebeests who for centuries had migrated to water during droughts were blocked by metal and began dying en masse. On Canada's plains, the situation is no better. A 2022 University of Calgary study found that Alberta has 16 times more barbed wire fences than paved roads. It's a maze that prevents pronghorn, the fastest land animals in North America, from completing their ancient migrations. Young animals now die not from predators, but because they can't find a way out of the wire trap. In Europe, fencing has made a comeback. Since 2015, dozens of countries, from Slovenia to Denmark, have erected fences to block African swine fever. The problem? The outbreaks are long gone, but the fences remain. They're called phantom walls, serving no purpose, yet still wounding deer, lynx, and other wildlife already backed into a corner. Australian officials track these stories. They've learned a fence built in haste for a temporary problem can linger for decades, with all the consequences. At least Australia patrols its mega mesh and factors in the damage. Most countries don't even know how many kilometers of wire they have, let alone its environmental cost. And now comes a new, unexpected twist. The threat isn't just wire, it's genes. The Great Wall of China, first recorded in 656 BCE, had 2,000 years to isolate species. Today, geneticists confirm plants on either side of the wall are less diverse and show signs of inbreeding. Australia is following that same path, only faster. Already, scientists note that kangaroos on one side of the fence grow more slowly, with lighter bones and delayed maturity, all because dingoes no longer teach them fear. If the fence were removed tomorrow, such naive animals might not survive in a world of predators. Yet the world continues to come to the Australian outback to learn. On the veranda of a pub in Tububara, engineers from Namibia, Mongolian wolf hunters, and American ranchers from Arizona gather. They arrive thinking of Australia as the land of paranoia and overwiring, but leave scribbling notes on what to copy. Solar-powered automatic gates, GPS-controlled baiting, composite posts made from recycled bottles. Barbed wire is no longer a joke. It's an export product. But a more important question arises. Is Australia exporting not just its technology, but its mistakes as well? Can other countries account for the long-term consequences of massive fences before buying up kilometers of steel? There's still hope. In 2004, Botswana removed a section of fence near the Nixika area. What happened next shocked everyone. Within just 3 years, zebras resumed ancient migration routes they had used before colonization. They crossed 600 kilometers, restored grazing lands, refilled watering holes, and boosted tourism income. All it took was removing the fence. Nature knew what to do. Australian ecologists now cite this case when advocating not for new walls, but adaptive corridors. Imagine a virtual geofence instead of barbed wire. Digital gates that open automatically as a herd approaches and close behind them. No bulldozers needed, just code. In the Cooper Creek region, engineers are already testing these systems on wild goats. Early results are promising, but the real shock came in March 2025, when a proposal was made to shift 50 kilometers of dingo fence northward. This would allow dingoes to return to dying grasslands while protecting sheep more precisely, with guard dogs and smart enclosures. An experiment near Wannering proved that removing just 1 kilometer of fencing led to plant growth, the return of lizards, and improved soil within just 3 seasons. Still, critics raised alarms. What if dingoes attack livestock? What if history repeats itself, like in the disaster of the 1930s? A government report estimated the new plan could save $80 million in fence maintenance over 20 years, but also posed a potential $65 million risk in livestock losses. And once again, the same question loomed. Are we about to repeat our own mistakes? New technology offered dazzling solutions. In Sydney, engineers tested fiber optic cables sensitive enough to detect paw movements and trigger alarms instantly. Drones would then deploy harmless pepper capsules, a digital fence, upgradable with software instead of bulldozers. As climate anomalies worsen, floods and fires now destroy kilometers of old fencing every year. It's clear we don't just need new fences, we need a new mindset. Australia is now trying something never done before, integrating ecosystems, economics, and cyber technology into one network. One experiment uses polymer posts embedded with sensors, termite-resistant and maintenance-free. Another powers automated gates with solar panels. The gates recognize trucks and close automatically without a driver's help. Some sections are even 3D printed on-site. Solar-powered printers fabricate replacement parts inside trailers. It's less like a desert farm and more like a high-tech laboratory. But even these innovations can't always keep up with nature. A summer storm in 2023 flattened 32 kilometers of fencing near Tububara. Contractors saved towns first. Farmers were left with faith, rope, and prayers. Only camels don't believe in prayers. There are over 500,000 camels in Australia, descendants of Afghan cavalry mounts. In drought, they head south in search of water. One male can bend 20 posts in a single night, turning wire into an accordion. A fence against such creatures is like a straw against a bulldozer. Farmers turned to high-tech warfare, Drones with thermal cameras now patrol before sunrise, sending breach coordinates to mobile phones. Some have embedded vibration sensors directly into the wire. Any tremor triggers a mobile alert. Others installed motion-activated floodlights along camel trails, hoping sudden light might deter the giants. Yet, despite all efforts, the fence consumes more than just public funds. It consumes lives. Not literally, but psychologically. A dogger's life, 3 weeks in the wilderness, 3 weeks off. Canned food. Silence. Talking to radios no one hears. Companies now pay mental health bonuses, offer satellite therapy calls, and send workers on seaside breaks, just to prevent mid-shift desertion. Meanwhile, insurance companies reevaluate everything, from rates to loan approvals. If the fence is in poor condition, livestock insurance becomes expensive, or denied entirely. A bank may reject a mortgage if a farmer's land falls within a risk zone. One snapped cable in the desert, and Sydney's interest rates start to shift. It's no longer just a fence. It's a fragile economic thread stretching from the sand to the stock exchange. But the story doesn't end there. Experts now argue we shouldn't build more fences. You should build smarter ones. A new strategy: screens instead of walls, targeted panels tailored to specific threats. In one place, sensors for feral cats. In another, thermal cameras that distinguish a mouse from a fox by the glow of moonlight. For bats, ultrasonic acoustic fences steer them away from wind turbines, saving both wildlife and energy. Even plants are now getting their own fencing. In rare snow gum eucalyptus groves, the government installed mesh to block wild deer from stripping bark in winter. The result? After 5 years, doubled canopy coverage and the return of songbirds, all thanks to an 800-meter barrier. Sometimes, victory is cheaper than a suburban traffic light. Today, every meter of Australian fence is more than a barrier. It's a mirror. It reflects who we protect and who we sacrifice, who we nurture and who we forget. Fences are no longer just wire and posts. They are part of the biosphere, psychology, economy, and even politics. They've become a catalyst. One simple step, made to protect sheep, has altered the color of Sydney's skies, revived migrations, saved endangered species, and rewritten bank reports. A fence that began in the dust now reaches all the way to the clouds. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more incredible stories that will change how you see the world.